So when we look at the model we have so far, we're in the viewport and the lighting is set to default lighting. If I change that to use all lights, you notice everything goes black because there aren't any lights in the scene. The default lights would give you a flat, even lighting from any vantage point. When you create lights yourself, you can increase the perception of volume from the model. So to do that, I'm going under Windows, Render Editors, and I'm going to select Light Editor. Okay, now the Light Editor will give you a collection of Maya lights. There's a little vertical line right here. Everything on this side is a light from Maya. Everything on this side is a light from Arnold. Like I mentioned, Arnold is the engine, the render engine that Autodesk contracted to work with Maya. So I'm going to use one Maya light. I'm going to use a direct light. That's going to be what we call my key light. It's the light that's going to be the main light on my object. And then I'm going to modify it with the other lights. So let's first just try to find that light. And usually, I'm going to hit the space bar so I have the forward view. And I've got my little outliner over here. And if I can't find something here in Maya, what I can do is say show objects. In this case, I can look for lights. And there's my direct light. And if I hit the W key, I can now move it. But if I hit the T key, which is the transform tool, I have two options now. I have this and the lights themselves. So the lights are here. If I scale them larger so you can see it better, that scaling doesn't affect the intensity of the light. If I then, but this is showing me where it's aiming. Okay, so from the top view, I'm going to create a classic upper left hand lighting. I want to be, and from the front view, I'm going to make sure I'm above, and I'll come from there. Now, I'm not seeing much of anything here, so I have to make sure I'm using that. And that's, there you go. So now you can see I've made quite a change, impact on the form. Okay, the side, let's put that use all lights too, but it's not going to be much because we're not seeing it there. And then from the perspective view, we can decide what we want to do. And if I turn it this way, you can notice that we get the back is illuminated on that side, the left side. Okay, so now we're going to work from this with the other lights. We're going to try to balance. So the next light I'm going to use is a this is a Arnold light, and it's called the sorry, wrong one. It's called an area light. So the direct light we used from Maya, that represents the sun. It has a very obvious direction, and it comes from a very broad source. This area light is more of a it's more a very big broad light. And if you look at it, I'm going to scale it up larger. You can see there's a little line there. That's the direction of it. And then you see this box. So it's like having a big flat light. Now, one unique thing about the area light, or several unique things. If I select the area light and then I've come over here and I've selected my attribute editor, there's an option here called normalize. I have to turn that off, otherwise the area light, the intensity of it has to be really jacked up, and it's not necessary. So I'm going to turn up the intensity a little bit here. Actually, I'm going to turn it down to about like 0.6 or 0.8. Somewhere in there. That's 8. That's good. Now I'm going to use the same trick I did before. I'm going to move the light, turn it, and then I am scaling it. Now when I scale it, that's unlike the direct light. Scaling does make the area light, it does increase its intensity. It does essentially do what you would think scaling does. It makes the light bigger and therefore makes the light have more influence or brighter. And if I move the light away, let's see, I can. Okay, now the other thing I like to do is add some type of reflective light color. So in this case, let's go to some kind of violet. And I still want it to be something of a shadow, because this light, this is my fill light. What I'm trying to do is get rid of this solid black shadow and get just a little more detail in there. So I'll do that. Okay. And maybe take the, oh, it didn't, I'm sorry, it didn't, I forgot to hit done. Let's see, let's take this color. I like to go maybe a little more violet. Okay. And you can see the area light here and the direct light there now. So that's the relationship I want. I want to kind of, if I, just for a second, go back to my light window, and you notice there's a little off switch, if you will, or don't show. So if I click that off, you can see how the shadow is quite a solid black, and then the area light is giving us a little illumination there. Alright, then the third light I'm going to use is another one of the Arnold lights, and this is called a sky dome light. And the reason I use this is it's just to give a general overall light. It's essentially as if there was a huge round ball of light surrounding the scene. Now, because I want this to just give me some light, I'm going to turn the intensity of it down. Okay, and I'm going to go back to my direct light and maybe crank that up just a little more. Right, but you can see then how, you know, we now have a lighter light, and even when there's shadow, we're not getting a black hole, and instead we're getting. So if I come up here and there's a little icon here that looks like one of those movie things at the start of the movie, and I click on it, this is called the render. It's going to actually make a picture of what the software sees, and that's what that looks like. Notice how sharp that edge is from the direct light. Okay, so let's go back to direct light, select it again. Again, I'm in my light editor, and then I'm going to go on to the attribute editor, and there's a little setting here that says Arnold. Even though this is a Maya light, it can have Arnold attributes edited. So here there's a option called angle. I'm going to turn that way up to 10, and I'm also going to turn the samples up a little bit. That should make it render the light a little more smoothly. And then I'm going to take the shadow density down a little bit so it isn't quite so black. And okay, so if I render that now, depending on what my render, see how this is how my render settings are, just by the last time I use it. So there's an option here. It's that same render icon, except it's got a little ball next to it, or again under window, rendering editors. That's the render view. This is the render settings. Okay, and in that settings, if I scroll down a bit, this is the size of the settings. Well, since I'm doing a vertical subject, I'm going to reverse those. And since we want it from the front view, let's actually look at. So I can scale this up now, or dolly in, by using the Option key and the right mouse to dolly in. And if I sit there like that, and then again render this, you see this time I get a softer shadow and I get the object within. I don't crop it. I don't crop it off. And I can adjust those numbers, obviously, to crop it, or I can take it into Photoshop. Now the last thing I want to say, I know this is a long tape about the lights. Last element I want you to be aware of. That gray background you see behind her, that's a function of the sky dome light. So I can do a number of things. If I want to get rid of in other words, I want this to render with a transparent background so that I could bring it, let's say, into Photoshop and put a photograph behind it, or use some type of other image. What I would have to do is go inside the attribute editor for the sky dome light and scroll down to where I see visibility, and then it says camera. Right now the camera, if I change it from 1 to 0, okay, and then I re-render, okay, so there's a little icon here. I'm going to click that. That's going to keep this original one, and then when I click the render icon again, it's going to do another. See, now I'm on a black background, but if I was to bring that into Photoshop, that background is not black. It's an alpha background. It's transparent. So you can experiment whether you want to keep it like that. So you have the flexibility to use another background or Photoshop or some other software to add, or you can keep the camera on and adjust how much the effect the camera has. In other words, is it full so that you have the light exactly? And you can experiment with, do I want to maybe use another color for the sky dome light. And so you can kind of get like a grayish blue there behind it. So this is the one we just did with the camera set at 5, and the color changed a little bit to kind of a cooler blue gray. This is where the camera was 100% off, so it's essentially on a transparent background, and this was the original. So generally you're just going to match. In most cases, to be honest with you, I'm going to put the camera off and control it in Photoshop, what I want in the background.